Black Men and Public Space is a harrowing and all too real piece of writing by Brent Staples that discusses sort of the ongoing problem of being considered a possible assailant or a possible threat, even though you are not, just because of the way you look. It really gets into a lot of specific details and specific examples to demonstrate this horrible phenomenon that unfortunately remains part of America. It says, right from the beginning, my first victim was a woman, white, well-dressed, probably in her early 20s. It's interesting that he says my first victim. That really gets that idea of, like, that's what people expect that they're going to be when they are encountering a person like our narrator, who is a somewhat threatening looking African American. Says to her, a youngish black man, a broad 6 feet 2 inches with a beard and billowing hair, both hands shoved into the pockets of a bulky military jacket, seemed menacingly close. That for this specific example here shows that to this woman that seemed like something to fear and to run away from, even though he was just walking down the street. That first encounter and those that followed signified that a vast, unnerving gulf lay between nighttime pedestrians, particularly women, and me, where our narrator, a perfectly fine, respectable, educated person who has a PhD in psychology from the University of Chicago, is somebody who, on the street at night, ends up being feared, right? And he uses a lot of really great, crisp examples to get at this. He says, I could cross in front of a car stopped at a traffic light and elicit the thunk, 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 thunk of the driver, black, white, male, or female, hammering down the door locks. I think it's really interesting that he says black, white, male, or female to demonstrate that regardless of the person inside the car, he's still seen as a threat. And this is despite the fact that, as it says, women are particularly vulnerable to street violence, and young black males are drastically overrepresented among the perpetrators of that violence. Yet these truths are no solace against the kind of alienation that comes of being ever the suspect, a fearsome entity with whom pedestrians avoid making eye contact. This is where he's saying that even though statistically speaking he is more likely to be a threat because of his demographics than other demographics may be, that doesn't take away the sting of being seen as a threat. This piece has just fantastic specific examples throughout it. It says, the most frightening of these confusions occurred in the late 70s and early 80s when I worked as a journalist in Chicago. One day, rushing into the office of a magazine I was writing for with a deadline story in hand, I was mistaken for a burglar. Right? So, like, it's a specific example. Another one, it says, another time I was on assignment for a local paper and killing time before an interview. I entered a jewelry store on the city's affluent near north side. The proprietor excused herself and returned with an enormous red Doberman pinscher straining at the end of a leash. So the mere fact that he went into a store elicited a response by somebody to go get a frightening dog because apparently he was a threatening individual. This is terrible, but they are great examples of exemplification. At the end of this piece, he discusses how he's sort of gone about trying to defuse this problem. And it says, virtually everyone seems to sense that a mugger wouldn't be warbling bright, sunny selections from Vivaldi's Four Seasons. It is my equivalent of the cowbell that hikers wear when they know they are in bear country. It's sort of like that idea that basically it's, he tries to make himself seem as disarming as possible. And humming Vivaldi's Four Seasons is about as good a way as you can possibly do. I recommend going ahead and looking that up on YouTube so you can listen to it.